The diplomatic chamber felt like a tomb where boredom went to die. Ambassador David Grant had attended 4,312 sessions of the Galactic Assembly over his 30-year career, and this one ranked somewhere between watching paint dry and counting grains of sand. The Tentari delegate droned on about shipping tariffs while David's mind wandered to his garden back on Earth, specifically the tomatoes he'd been growing before this assignment. Then High Commander Brudask stood up. The Cravathi warrior was built like a tank wrapped in scales and dipped in arrogance. His species had conquered 47 systems in the last 5 centuries through sheer military might and an attitude problem that could fill a small moon. When he activated his speaking crystal, the entire assembly went silent, not out of respect, but out of shock that the Cravathi had actually showed up to a diplomatic gathering. "I stand before this assembly to deliver a formal declaration," Brudask announced, his voice like grinding metal. "The Cravathi Dominion hereby claims sovereignty over all human-occupied worlds. Humanity has hoarded 12 garden planets, refused to share terraforming technology that rightfully belongs to all species, and generally acted as parasites upon galactic resources. We demand immediate surrender of 80% of human territory and submission to Dominion governance. You have 30 standard days to comply." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted, translators struggled to keep up, and somewhere in the back, a Florian representative fainted from the drama. David just sat there, and then he started laughing. It wasn't a nervous laugh or a polite chuckle. It was the deep, genuine laugh of someone who just heard the funniest joke in 3,000 years. His assistant, Lynn Hayes, stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Other delegates turned to watch, some confused, others concerned that the human had finally snapped under the pressure of bureaucratic tedium. "Is something amusing about our declaration, human?" Brudask growled, his scales bristling. David wiped tears from his eyes and stood up slowly. "I'm sorry, Commander. It's just that you have absolutely no idea what you've done." His smile was warm, but his eyes were cold. "Tell me, have you studied human history? Our real history, not the peaceful last 3 millennia. We know you garden and build monuments and write poetry," Brudask sneered. "You are a species of artists and dreamers. You will crumble before true warriors." "That's what I thought," David said quietly. He turned to the assembly. "I request a recess to consult with Earth leadership. We will respond to the Cravathi ultimatum within the specified time frame." As David gathered his materials, Ambassador Kuril of the Tentari species approached him. Kuril was old, even by Tentari standards, his 4 eyes clouded with age but still sharp with intelligence. "Ambassador Grant, might I have a word?" "Of course, Ambassador." Kuril's voice dropped to a whisper. "I have read the restricted histories, the ones kept in sealed archives. I know what humanity was before the Great Peace." He paused, his tentacles quivering. "The Cravathi don't know, do they?" David's smile never wavered. "No, they don't. We spent 3,000 years making sure nobody did. We wanted to be remembered for what we became, not what we were. And now they've forced our hand." David placed a gentle hand on Kuril's shoulder. "You might want to move your merchant fleets out of sectors 447 through 512. Just a friendly suggestion." Kuril's eyes widened. "All 12 sectors, but that's everything between Cravathi space and human territory." "Yes." David's expression softened. "We're not monsters, Kuril. We don't want collateral damage, but we're not going to let them waltz into our homes either." Lynn caught up with David as he left the chamber. "Sir, I don't understand. Why were you laughing? They just declared war on us." "Walk with me, Lynn." They moved through the pristine corridors of Haven's Rest Station. "How long have you been in the diplomatic corps?" 5 years, sir." "And in those 5 years, what have you learned about humanity's past?" "We were colonizers, explorers. We spread across the solar system, then to other stars. We built, we created, we grew." "That's the official version." David stopped at a viewing port showing the star field. "What they don't teach in schools is what we did before that. Lynn, humanity fought wars for 10,000 years. We got so good at killing each other that we developed weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets. We created automated systems that could wage war without human oversight. We studied strategy, tactics, and combat psychology the way other species study art. Lynn's face paled, but we chose peace. We did 3,000 years ago. We looked at ourselves and decided enough was enough. We dismantled our weapons, deactivated our war machines, and dedicated ourselves to building instead of destroying. David's reflection in the viewport looked tired. But we didn't forget. We couldn't afford to, so we created the Remembrance. The Remembrance. Museums, archives, training facilities, all sealed and maintained by a select few. We preserved every tactical manual, every weapon blueprint, every strategy that made us the most dangerous species we'd ever encountered. He turned to face her. We kept them just in case someone ever forced us to remember. And the Cravathi just forced us. They did indeed. David activated his communicator. The face of Council Director Rebecca Walsh appeared, her expression grave. Ambassador Grant, I've been watching the Assembly feed. Director, I'm formally requesting activation of Emergency Protocol Grandfather. Rebecca closed her eyes. Are you certain, once we open those doors? They gave us 30 days to surrender. David's voice was steady. I think it's time we reminded the galaxy why we stopped fighting ourselves. Understood, the Remembrance facilities are being activated as we speak. Rebecca paused. David, how many do you think will volunteer? All of them. David looked out at the stars. Humanity hasn't forgotten what it means to defend home. We just hoped we'd never need to remember. The transmission ended. Lynn stood beside him, processing everything she'd learned. What happens now? David's smile returned, sad and knowing. Now we show the Cravathi why peaceful species are often the most dangerous, because we chose peace knowing exactly what the alternative was. Across the galaxy, vault doors that hadn't opened in 3 millennia began to unlock. Inside Earth's primary remembrance facility, holographic displays flickered to life, showing battles and strategies from humanity's violent past. Volunteers lined up by the millions, not knowing exactly what they were volunteering for, only that humanity needed them. And in the depths of space, old shipyards started receiving blueprints marked with a single word: reactivate. The Cravathi had poked a sleeping giant. Now they would learn the difference between a species that couldn't fight and a species that chose not to. Rebecca Walsh hadn't slept in 48 hours, but sleep seemed like a luxury humanity couldn't afford right now. She walked through corridors that smelled of recycled air and old metal, deep beneath the surface of Earth's largest continent, into a facility that officially didn't exist. The Remembrance had been sealed since 2024, maintained by a skeleton crew of historians and engineers who dedicated their lives to preserving what humanity had been. Systems are coming online, Director, said her chief archivist, a young man named Peter Williams whose ancestors had fought in the Belt Wars. We're experiencing some power fluctuations in sections 7 through 12, but nothing critical. Rebecca nodded, her eyes scanning the massive holographic displays springing to life around her. Battle maps from the Siege of Mars, tactical analysis from the Third Colonial Uprising, weapons specifications for ships that had been mothballed before her great-grandmother was born. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. How many volunteers do we have? She asked. 40 million as of an hour ago. Peter pulled up the statistics. And the number keeps climbing. Most don't even know what they're volunteering for. They know enough. Rebecca pulled up a personnel file. They know humanity needs them. Across human space, the transformation had begun. On agricultural world harvest, farmers set down their tools and reported to hidden facilities beneath their fields. On the ocean planet Thalassa, underwater research stations revealed themselves to be deactivated defense platforms. On the frozen moon of Europa, ice mining operations ceased as the entire facility reconfigured into a military staging area. Commander Brutask stood in his war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing Cravathi fleet positions. His second-in-command, a grizzled veteran named Grakthar, studied the human territory maps with growing confusion. "High Commander, our intelligence reports are contradictory." "Explain." Brudask didn't look up from his tactical display. "Human colonies are conducting what they call evacuation drills." Grakthar manipulated the hologram. "But the numbers don't match. They're moving civilians, yes, but not all of them. And the ships conducting these evacuations are civilian vessels, but their power signatures are inconsistent with their registered classifications." "They're panicking." Brudask dismissed the concern with a wave. "They're scrambling to protect their soft populations. This proves our intelligence was correct. They have no military capability to speak of." "With respect, Commander, I'm not sure panic explains these readings." Grakthar highlighted several anomalies. "Their shipyards are activating. Facilities that have been dormant for centuries are suddenly drawing massive power, and we're detecting encrypted communications across all human networks." "Industrial mobilization." Brudask finally looked at his second. "They're probably trying to build defenses. It's pointless. We have 800,000 warships. They have merchant vessels and colony transports." Grakthar wanted to argue but knew better. Instead, he filed his concerns in his personal log, a habit that had kept him alive through 3 major campaigns. On Earth, Henry Park sat in his small apartment watching the news feeds. At 95 years old, he was the last living human who'd actually seen combat, a minor border skirmish 80 years ago that most people had forgotten. He'd retired with honors, spent decades teaching history, and figured he'd die peacefully in his sleep. Then his communicator chimed with a priority message. "Henry Park, this is Director Walsh." Rebecca's face appeared on his screen. "I know you're retired and I know you earned that retirement, but I'm asking you to come back." Henry looked at his wrinkled hands. "Director, I'm 95. What could I possibly contribute?" "Experience." Rebecca's expression was earnest. "We have 40 million volunteers who have never seen combat. We have tactics and strategies preserved in databases. But we need someone who remembers what it feels like. Someone who can teach them the difference between knowing about war and understanding it." Henry was quiet for a long moment. "Where do you need me?" "Earth's Orbital Defense Command." Rebecca smiled. "We're reactivating the Sol system defensive grid. I need someone who can coordinate planetary defense. I haven't done this in 80 years. It's like riding a bicycle, they say." Henry laughed, a sound like dry leaves. "All right, Director, send me the briefing materials. Let an old soldier have one more tour." Lynn Hayes found herself assigned to the reactivation team for humanity's defense fleet. She'd been a diplomat her entire career, skilled at negotiation and protocol. Now she stood in a massive orbital shipyard watching vessels that predated her grandparents emerge from storage. "These are colony defense ships," the shipyard engineer explained. He was a massive man named Rodriguez who spoke about spacecraft the way poets spoke about love. "Built during the late expansion era, decommissioned in 2247 when we signed the non-aggression protocols." Lynn studied the ship in front of her. It looked ancient, all hard angles and brutal efficiency. "Can they fight?" "Can they fight?" Rodriguez laughed. "Ma'am, these ships were designed for one purpose, protecting colonies from hostile forces. They're not pretty, they're not comfortable, but every system on these vessels is dedicated to combat effectiveness." He patted the hull affectionately. "Modern Cravathi warships rely on energy shields and plasma weapons. These beauties use kinetic weapons that don't care about shields. Tungsten rods accelerated to relativistic speeds. Physics doesn't take sides." "How many do we have?" 200 from this facility alone." Rodriguez's smile faded. "There are 40 facilities like this across human space. We'll have 10,000 ships operational within 10 days. Lynn did the math in her head. 10,000 warships against 800,000 Cravathi vessels. The numbers were still overwhelming. Is that enough? Depends on your definition of enough. Rodriguez pulled up tactical displays. If we were fighting a conventional war, fleet against fleet, trying to match their numbers. No, but we're not planning to fight fair, we're planning to fight smart. Admiral Patricia Cross had been teaching naval history at the academy when the activation order came. She'd served 40 years in the Colonial Patrol, back when that meant escorting merchant ships and responding to distress calls. She'd never fired a shot in anger, never commanded in combat. Now she stood on the bridge of the carrier Wellington, newly pulled from storage and refitted with modern systems. "Admiral, all department heads report ready," her executive officer announced. Patricia studied the tactical display showing the Cravathi fleet's projected movements. They were heading for Refuge, the closest human colony to Cravathi space. 4 million people lived on Refuge, mostly farmers and artists who'd chosen a simple life far from Earth's complexity. "What's the status of Refuge's evacuation?" she asked. "Civilian population is at 40% evacuated," the tactical officer highlighted the colony. "Remaining population is largely volunteers who have activated the local defense protocols." Patricia felt a chill. Those volunteers were people who'd lived their entire lives in peace, now choosing to stand and fight. "How long until the Cravathi arrive?" 18 hours, Admiral." "Then we'd better get moving." Patricia activated fleet communications. "All ships, this is Admiral Cross, set course for Refuge. Maximum acceleration. It's time to show the Cravathi what a peaceful species remembers about war." The fleet moved out, 200 ships against 40,000. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Assembly watched through long-range sensors. Some species placed bets on how quickly humanity would fall. Others, the older species who'd heard whispers about Earth's violent past, watched in silence. Ambassador Curiel sat in his quarters, reviewing classified historical documents he'd requisitioned from the Tentari archives. What he read made his tentacles quiver. Humanity hadn't just fought wars. They'd elevated warfare to an art form. They'd created entire philosophies around combat, wrote books analyzing ancient battles, studied their enemies with the same dedication other species applied to science. He drafted a message to the Tentari Council. "Recommend immediate withdrawal of all Tentari assets from sectors adjacent to Cravathi human conflict zone. Humanity is not what we believed them to be." The response came quickly. "Request denied. We have commercial interests in those sectors. Maintain position and observe." Curiel deleted the message and began transferring his personal wealth into portable accounts. When this was over, someone would need to rebuild. He intended to survive to see it. Day 10 of the ultimatum arrived with Brutask's fleet entering the Refuge system. What they found waiting would change everything. Refuge had been a farming colony for 200 years, known throughout human space for producing the sweetest apples and the most stubborn independent settlers. Now its orchard stood empty, its cities silent, and its orbital space filled with something the Cravathi hadn't expected: resistance. Commander Grakthar was the first to notice the anomaly. "High Commander, sensors are detecting energy signatures in orbit around the colony world." Brutask barely glanced at the display. "Defensive satellites probably, civilian-grade protection, clear them and proceed with the landing." "Sir, the signatures don't match any known civilian platform." Grakthar enhanced the sensor feed. "They're ships, 200 contacts, frigate to cruiser class." That got Brutask's attention. He moved to the tactical display, his scales shifting color with agitation. 200 human vessels hung in space between his 40,000-ship armada and the defenseless planet below. They looked old, their hulls bearing the scars of age and their designs predating modern galactic standards. "Hail them," Brutask ordered. "Let's hear what pathetic threat they think they can make." The communication channel opened, and Admiral Patricia Cross appeared on the screen. She was a middle-aged woman with gray streaking her dark hair and eyes that had seen things Brutask couldn't imagine. "Cravathi Fleet, this is Admiral Cross of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are ordered to reverse course and leave this system immediately." Brutask laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Admiral, you command 200 ships. I command 40,000. Your mathematics skills must be severely lacking. I command 200 ships in this system. Patricia's expression never changed. And you command 40,000 ships that have never faced an opponent who fights back. There's a difference. Is that supposed to frighten me? Patricia leaned forward. No, Commander, it's supposed to give you one last chance to leave with your fleet intact. What happens next is on you. Brutesque terminated the connection. All ships, combat formation Delta, prepare to eliminate the human vessels. Try to keep some intact for intelligence purposes, but I want this over quickly. The Cravathi fleet moved like a slow tide, thousands of ships arranging themselves into their standard attack pattern. They'd used it successfully in 47 conquests. There was no reason to believe this would be different. Patricia watched the Cravathi formation take shape. Tactical analysis. Her tactical officer, a young woman named Ashley Freeman, studied the display. They're using a standard envelopment pattern, trying to surround us. Their doctrine emphasizes overwhelming firepower and shield superiority. Then let's teach them why old tactics still work. Patricia activated fleet communications. All ships go to weapons free, target their shield generators first, then propulsion. Rules of engagement, disable, not destroy, we're not murderers. The human ships spread out, their formations seemingly random. The Cravathi commanders noted this with satisfaction. The humans didn't even know how to maintain proper battle spacing. Then the human ship Thermopylae fired. It wasn't an energy weapon. Cravathi shields were designed to deflect plasma and laser fire. What emerged from Thermopylae's railgun was a tungsten rod, 3 meters long and accelerated to .03 light speed. It passed through the Cravathi shield like it wasn't there and punched through the destroyer Dominant Fist's engineering section. The destroyer didn't explode. It simply stopped, its engines dead, life support failing, crew scrambling for emergency protocols. All ships return fire, Brutesque roared. 40,000 Cravathi vessels opened fire simultaneously. The space around the human fleet lit up with plasma bolts and energy beams. Cravathi gunnery computers calculated perfect firing solutions. Their weapons struck with precision. And mostly missed. The human ships weren't where the targeting computers predicted they'd be. They moved erratically, using short fusion bursts to dodge at the last second. When weapons did connect, the human ships' hulls absorbed the impacts. They weren't using shields. Their armor was simple, thick, and effective. They're not following any known tactical doctrine, Grakthar shouted over the chaos. Our targeting systems can't predict their movements. Patricia smiled grimly. That's because we wrote the book on unpredictability. She watched her tactical display. Alamo, break left and target that cruiser's bridge. Hastings, cover her flank. Midway, I need you to. An explosion rocked the Wellington. Shields at 70%, her chief engineer reported. We don't have shields, Patricia reminded him. Oh, right, hull integrity at 70%, Admiral. That's better, Patricia keyed the communications. All ships execute pattern Winchester. The human fleet suddenly accelerated, not away from the Cravathi, but toward them. At ranges where energy weapons became wildly effective, the human ships closed to point-blank distance where their kinetic weapons couldn't miss. The Cravathi formation began to collapse. Ships collided trying to avoid the humans' suicide charges. Commanders screamed contradictory orders. The perfect battle plan fell apart. Aboard the Agincourt, Captain Neal. Richards made a decision. His ship was damaged, engines failing, but his railgun still worked. Ahead of him, a Cravathi dreadnought was coordinating a squadron assault on 3 human destroyers. All hands abandon ship. Neal activated the evacuation protocols. You have 2 minutes. His crew didn't argue. They'd trained for this. Emergency pods launched as Neal pointed his dying ship at the dreadnought and pushed the engines to maximum. The Agincourt struck at relativistic speed. The impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The dreadnought vaporized, along with 53 nearby Cravathi ships caught in the debris field. Patricia watched the tactical display update. Get recovery ships to Agincourt's escape pods now. 6 hours into the battle, Brudask stared at his casualty reports in disbelief. 22,000 ships destroyed or disabled. The humans had lost 1,500 vessels. It was impossible. The mathematics didn't work. High Commander, recommend immediate withdrawal. Grakthar's voice was steady despite the chaos. We cannot sustain these losses. Withdrawal, Brudask's voice was dangerous. We outnumber them, we're winning. Sir, we've lost half our fleet. They've lost less than 1% of theirs in this sector. Grakthar pulled up galaxy-wide intelligence. And reports are coming in from other fronts. Humans are engaging our supply lines, our communication relays, our mining operations. This isn't a battle. It's a coordinated campaign. Brudask looked at the tactical display. The remaining human ships moved like predators, each one targeting multiple Cravathi vessels with terrifying efficiency. Sound the retreat. The words tasted like ash. The Cravathi fleet turned and ran. Patricia didn't pursue. She'd made her point. All ships, cease fire, begin search and rescue operations. I want every escape pod recovered, Cravathi and human alike. Lynn Hayes, monitoring from the Wellington's command center, approached the Admiral. Ma'am, shouldn't we press the advantage? No, Patricia studied the retreating fleet. We're not trying to exterminate them, we're trying to teach them. There's a difference. She activated communications to the fleeing Cravathi. Commander Brudask, you have 19 days remaining on your ultimatum. Use them wisely. Next time we won't be so gentle. Across the galaxy, every species with long-range sensors had watched the Battle of Refuge. Analysts scrambled to understand what they'd seen. How had 200 ships defeated 40,000? Ambassador Curil knew. He'd read the histories. Humanity hadn't won through superior technology or greater numbers. They'd won through experience. 3,000 years of peace hadn't erased 10,000 years of war. They'd just put it in storage. And now that storage was open. Empress Shakara had ruled the Cravathi Dominion for 70 years, crushing rebellions, conquering systems, and building an empire through strength and will. She'd never known defeat. Standing in her throne room watching casualty reports scroll across holographic displays, she was learning what that word meant. 22,000 ships, her voice was quiet, dangerous, against 200 human vessels. Brudask stood before her, scales pale with shame. The humans fight unlike any opponent we've encountered. They use weapons that bypass our shields. They employ tactics that our combat computers cannot predict. They defeated you. Shakara descended from her throne. They humiliated the Dominion's finest fleet. Empress, I recommend we reconsider our position. Brudask chose his words carefully. Intelligence suggests the humans have significantly more military capability than we assessed. Perhaps negotiation. Shakara's claw struck him across the face. Negotiation? You would have me bow to these pacifists, these gardeners and artists who got lucky in one engagement. With respect, Empress, it wasn't luck. Brudask's voice remained steady despite the pain. It was skill, experience. They knew exactly what they were doing. Then we shall show them what we are capable of when truly challenged. Shakara returned to her throne. Mobilize the full Imperial fleet, 800,000 ships. We will crush their homeworld, destroy Earth itself. Let them negotiate with ashes. Brudask wanted to argue. The look in Shakara's eyes told him argument meant death. He bowed and left to execute his orders. Meanwhile, humanity wasn't waiting for the next attack. Admiral Cross had proposed a strategy that made the civilian leadership uncomfortable, but which they ultimately approved. Take the fight to the enemy. Human fleets struck across Cravathi space with surgical precision. They didn't target civilians. Instead, they hit supply depots, fuel refineries, communication satellites, and repair facilities. Within 72 hours, the Cravathi war machine began grinding to a halt. On the mining world Krath Prime, workers watched in confusion as human ships appeared in orbit. Instead of attacking, the humans broadcast a message. This facility is a military target. You have 6 hours to evacuate. Transports will be provided. The Cravathi workers assumed it was a trick. When human shuttles actually arrived, offering transportation to neutral space, they didn't know what to think. Some fled, others stayed, certain it was a trap. 6 hours later, electromagnetic pulse weapons disabled every piece of equipment on the planet. The facility went dark, but not a single civilian was harmed. Those who'd stayed found themselves on human transport ships anyway, forcibly evacuated to safety. Similar scenes played out across a dozen Cravathi resource worlds. Humans would arrive, evacuate civilians, disable military infrastructure, and leave. They never occupied territory, never took resources, just removed the enemy's ability to wage war. Captain Neil Ockhaffer commanded the carrier Wellington, now promoted after the Battle of Refuge. His ship specialized in deploying autonomous drones, thousands of small craft that could coordinate attacks across vast distances. He'd been a teacher before the war, instructing children about ancient battles. Now he was fighting them. Captain, we're approaching the Cravathi shipyard complex at Drakkar. His tactical officer highlighted the massive orbital structures. Intelligence reports 3 dreadnoughts under construction, estimated completion in 14 days. Neil studied the tactical plot. The shipyard was surrounded by defensive platforms and patrolling destroyers. Launch drone Swarm Alpha, target the construction ships, not the dreadnoughts themselves. I want those vessels intact but impossible to complete. Thousands of small drones deployed from Wellington's launch bays. They moved like a school of fish, coordinating through distributed intelligence. Cravathi gunners opened fire, but for every drone destroyed, 10 more slipped through. They attached to the construction vessels, delivered their payloads, and self-destructed. The construction ships lost power, life support, propulsion. The partially built dreadnoughts floated helplessly, resources and time wasted. But the workers aboard were already being rescued by automated emergency systems. Target neutralized. Captain, the tactical officer, looked troubled. Sir, why didn't we just destroy the dreadnoughts? Because those ships can be salvaged, rebuilt for peaceful purposes. Neil watched the rescue operations on his display. We're not trying to eliminate the Cravathi, we're trying to show them that war with humanity is unsustainable. Back on Earth, Henry Park coordinated the Sol system defense from an orbital command station. At 95, he'd expected to spend his final years in quiet retirement. Instead, he found himself managing the largest defensive grid in human space. Status report. His voice was scratchy but firm. All defensive platforms online. The young officer coordinating the grid was someone who could have been Henry's great-great-grandson. Asteroid belt railgun batteries are charged. Lunar mass drivers ready. Mars fleet reports combat readiness. Henry studied the plot showing Cravathi fleet movements. Intelligence suggested Shakara was committing everything to one final assault on Earth. 200,000 ships, maybe more. How many vessels do we have in system? 50,000, sir, plus the fixed defenses. Still outnumbered 4-1, Henry smiled. Good thing we don't fight fair. He activated communications to all defensive positions. Listen up, the enemy is coming here because they think Earth is soft. They think hitting our homeworld will break our spirit. They're wrong. We chose to stop fighting. We didn't lose the ability. When they arrive, we're going to remind them why humanity was feared before we were loved. Ambassador David Grant received the intelligence about Shakara's planned assault while still at the Galactic Assembly. Other species offered assistance. Kuril was particularly insistent. Ambassador, the Tentari can provide medical support, humanitarian aid. The old alien's tentacles quivered with concern. I appreciate that, Kuril. David's smile was genuine. But we need you to do something else. When this is over, the Cravathi will need help rebuilding. They'll need someone to vouch for them in the assembly. Someone to help them find a path forward that doesn't involve conquest. You think you'll win? I know we'll win. David looked out at the stars. But winning isn't the same as succeeding. We need to make sure this war ends with peace, not just victory. That requires the galaxy to see the Cravathi as people who made mistakes, not monsters. To be punished forever. Kuril was quiet for a moment. You're planning their rehabilitation before you've even fought them. That's either incredibly arrogant or incredibly wise. It's what we learned from our own history. David turned to face him. After our worst wars, we spent decades helping our former enemies rebuild. We learned that crushing an opponent creates resentment, helping them creates allies. The hard part is winning while maintaining enough restraint to make peace possible afterward. Director Rebecca Walsh contacted David from Earth. Ambassador, Cravathi fleet is mobilizing. Intelligence suggests they're committing everything. We're looking at 200,000 ships minimum. And our forces, 50,000 in system, another 30,000 within rapid response range. Rebecca's expression was calm. We're outnumbered, but we have advantages, home territory, prepared defenses, and 3,000 years of pent-up strategic innovation. What are our projected casualties? Rebecca hesitated. If they press the attack fully, we could lose 10 to 15,000 ships, maybe 5 million personnel. David closed his eyes. 5 million people, each one someone's child, parent, sibling, friend. Can we win without those losses? Not if they commit fully. But David, Rebecca leaned forward. They won't commit fully because we're going to show them something they've never seen. An opponent that can defeat them so thoroughly that surrender becomes preferable to extinction. And if Shakara refuses to surrender? Then we make the choice for her. Rebecca's voice hardened. We didn't choose this war, but we will end it, one way or another. Across human space, fleets prepared for the coming storm. Civilians were evacuated from border worlds. Defense platforms activated. Volunteers who'd never held weapons learned how to fight. And in the depths of space, ancient warships that had been sleeping for millennia awakened one final time. The Cravathi were bringing everything they had. They were about to discover that humanity had been holding back. The Cravathi armada emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system like a plague of locusts blotting out the stars. 200,000 warships, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, arrayed in perfect formation under the direct command of Empress Shakara herself. She stood on the bridge of her flagship Eternal Dominance, scales gleaming with anticipation. Scan the system. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Show me the pathetic defenses these gardeners have prepared. The tactical display lit up and kept lighting up. Empress, the scanning officer's voice trembled. Initial count shows 50,000 human vessels, but there are additional signatures, thousands of them. They appear to be weapons platforms disguised as asteroids, defensive satellites, mass driver installations on planetary bodies. Shakara studied the display. The Sol system wasn't just defended. It was a fortress. Every moon, every asteroid, every planetary orbit bristled with weapons. No matter, we have numbers, all ships advance, target the homeworld directly, break through whatever stands in our way. The Armada moved forward, and humanity responded. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter suddenly revealed its secret. What appeared to be millions of chunks of rock were actually concealed weapons platforms, railgun batteries that had been installed over decades, hidden in plain sight. They opened fire simultaneously. Tungsten rods accelerated to relativistic speeds tore through the Cravathi vanguard. Ships that had shields designed to stop energy weapons found those shields useless against solid matter moving at 0.3 light speed. The first wave lost 5,000 vessels in 90 seconds. Henry Park watched from orbital command, his ancient eyes tracking the battle with practiced calm. Luna batteries fire, target their command ships, force them to scatter. The moon rotated, revealing massive installations built into its surface. Electromagnetic accelerators that could launch projectiles at speeds that made railguns look slow. The weapons fired, their targets precisely calculated by computers that had been running war simulations for 3,000 years. Cravathi capital ships began exploding as kinetic rounds punched through their armor like paper. Shakara's tactical display became a chaos of red warning lights and casualty reports. "All ships evasive maneuvers," Brudask commanded. He'd been given tactical control despite his earlier defeat. "Spread formation, don't give them concentrated targets." The Cravathi fleet scattered, which was exactly what humanity wanted. From Mars orbit, Admiral Patricia Cross launched her carrier groups instead of engaging. Directly, her ships deployed drone swarms, millions of autonomous attack units that moved in coordinated patterns, each one a small missile guided by artificial intelligence. "Deploy pattern swarm echo," Patricia's voice was steady. "Focus on their logistics vessels, fuel tankers, ammunition haulers, command ships." The drones struck like hornets, overwhelming Cravathi point defenses through sheer numbers. Individual ships tried to defend themselves, but every drone destroyed took down another with it. The Cravathi supply chain began collapsing in real time. Aboard Eternal Dominance, Shakara watched her fleet being systematically dismantled. "This is impossible. We outnumber them 4-1. "Numbers mean nothing if you can't bring them to bear." Brudask's voice was quiet. "Empress, we need to withdraw. We're losing ships faster than we can." "No," Shakara's claw slammed into the console. "We advance. All ships maximum acceleration, ram their defenses if you must. We will break through." 100,000 Cravathi ships surged forward in a desperate charge. It was magnificent, brave, and ultimately futile. Earth itself, the blue marble hanging in space, revealed its final secret: orbital platforms that had been disguised as commercial stations transformed, unfolding like deadly flowers to reveal weapons that predated the modern era. Plasma cannons, nuclear-tipped missiles, and something new: quantum disruption fields that destabilized faster than light drives. The charging Cravathi fleet found their engines failing. Ships that tried to retreat couldn't. They were trapped in normal space, conventional drives insufficient to escape, sitting targets for human weapons. The battle became a slaughter. Not because humanity was cruel, but because the Cravathi refused to surrender. Ship after ship was disabled, life support targeted, weapons destroyed, but crews left alive. Human rescue vessels moved through the debris field, pulling Cravathi survivors from wrecked ships even as the battle continued. 6 hours into the engagement, the Cravathi armada had been reduced to 70,000 functional vessels. Human losses totaled 4,000 ships. The mathematics were clear. Admiral Cross opened a channel to Eternal Dominance. "Empress Shakara, this ends now. Surrender your fleet and we will guarantee the safety of your personnel. Continue fighting and we will disable every ship you have." Shakara's face appeared on the screen, scales dark with rage and shame. "You ask me to surrender, to accept defeat." "I'm asking you to choose life over pride." Patricia's expression softened. "Your people are dying for a war they cannot win. How many more need to die before you accept reality? Better to die with honor than live with shame." A new voice entered the channel, Commander Brudask. "No, Empress." His image appeared split-screen. "Better to live and learn from our mistakes." He turned to his crew. "All ships under my direct command, cease fire, disable weapons, prepare for surrender protocols." "Brudask, I will have you executed for this treason." "You'll have to survive first." Brudask's tone was sad but firm. "And that requires ending this war. I will not sacrifice my people for pride." 2/3 of the remaining Cravathi fleet followed his orders. Shakara stared at her display. Her fleet was surrendering. Her commanders were abandoning her. Her empire was crumbling. She reached for the self-destruct controls. And her own bridge crew stopped her. "Enough, Empress." Her chief of security gently restrained her. "We've lost. Accept it with the dignity of a leader, not the desperation of a tyrant." The Battle of Saul ended not with a final explosion, but with a whimper. Cravathi ships powered down weapons. Human vessels moved in to provide assistance. And across the galaxy, every species that had been watching understood that something fundamental had shifted. David Grant arrived in Sol's system 3 days after the battle. He met with Empress Shakara aboard a neutral station, with Brudesk and Admiral Cross present. Shakara looked diminished, broken. "Why didn't you destroy us? You had every right." David sat across from her. "Because we remember what it's like to be you. Aggressive, proud, certain of our superiority. We fought wars for 10,000 years, Empress. We killed billions of our own people before we learned the lessons you're learning now." "And what lesson is that?" "That strength without wisdom leads to ruin. That victory without mercy creates only future enemies. That true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice to build." David leaned forward. "We didn't smile when you declared war because we enjoyed it. We smiled because we knew exactly how this would end. You would learn, or you would fall. We're giving you the chance to." Learned. The peace treaty was signed on Earth, in a ceremony watched by the entire galaxy. The terms were surprisingly generous. The Cravathi Dominion would demilitarize gradually, join the Galactic Assembly as full members, and participate in cultural exchange programs designed to teach them what humanity had learned from 3,000 years of peace. Rebecca Walsh gave a speech at the signing. "War is easy. Any species can master destruction. Peace is hard. It requires constant effort, constant vigilance, constant choice. We chose peace 3,000 years ago not because we were weak, but because we understood war's true cost. Today, we welcome the Cravathi to that same understanding." Henry Park retired again, this time without interruption. He spent his final years teaching young Cravathi officers about military history, showing them not just how to fight, but why choosing not to fight was often braver. Admiral Cross returned to teaching, her lectures now informed by actual combat experience. When asked what the most important lesson of the war was, she always gave the same answer. "We won the war, but we succeeded by winning the peace. Remember that difference." Lynn Hayes became humanity's ambassador to the Cravathi homeworld, helping rebuild what the war had damaged. She learned their language, understood their culture, and became a bridge between species. The galaxy settled into an uneasy peace, one enforced not by threat but by understanding. Humanity had proven they could fight. More importantly, they'd proven they knew when to stop. Ambassador Curiel wrote a book about the war. Its final line became famous. "Humanity smiled when war was declared not from cruelty, but from sad knowledge. They knew they would win, they knew the cost, and they knew that their true victory would be showing mercy to the defeated. This is what makes them dangerous, not their weapons, but their wisdom." David Grant stood in a memorial garden on Earth, reading the names of the fallen, human and Cravathi together. His smile was sad as he placed a flower. "Did we do the right thing?" Lynn asked, standing beside him. "We did the necessary thing." David looked up at the stars. "We showed the galaxy that humanity chose peace from strength, not weakness. That choice has weight now, meaning." He started walking. "The hard part comes next, maintaining that peace, making sure future generations never forget why we made this choice." Across human space, the weapons were being deactivated again. Ships returned to storage. Soldiers became civilians, teachers, artists, farmers. The remembrance facilities sealed once more, locked away but never forgotten. Because humanity understood the most important lesson of all. Peace isn't the absence of the ability to fight. It's the choice not to. And that choice, made with full knowledge of the alternative, was the strongest statement any species could make. The galaxy learned, the Cravathi learned, and humanity, having taught the lesson one more time, went back to their gardens, their art, their poetry. Smiling, not because they'd won a war, but because they'd proven that peace was a choice worth fighting for.